welcome to Board Stupid. We're the podcast that loves talking tabletop, board games, D&D, and other awesome stuff. I'm Tom.
And I'm Simon.
We're just a couple of nerds talking about the things that we love and that are worth geeking out over. So, Simon, if you're ready, let's dive into this week's episode. This week, we played Fateforge, Chronicles of Kaan. We played is a series where we talk about an epic board game that we played this week. This week, it's the fast-paced, dice-manipulating dungeon crawler, Fateforge. In this episode, we'll be diving into the things that we liked and breaking down the elements that make it great, because at the end of the day, we only play awesome games, and Fateforge is a fantastic dungeon-crawling co-op puzzle?
Yeah, how long can we stretch this title? It's an action-adventure, it's a choose-your-own-story, it's a dice-chucking combat game, all mashed into one.
It's very puzzly. It's more puzzly than a lot of dungeon crawlers. Before we go too far, I will probably preface this with a bit of a spoiler warning. I think we'll probably try and sanitize ourselves, but just in case you are playing or intend to play the game, we will try not to spoil too many things.
Yeah, there's some stickers to be peeled, lots of locations to be uncovered, various unlocks in the card deck to pull into your story sections, and a whole bunch of stuff. And
there's some mechanics and things that unlock as you progress through the game that we might mention. So just a little warning, but we should be fine.
I think so. We're at this point of recording about halfway through, I reckon, maybe just shy of a halfway through. So there's probably stuff we've not yet seen, Tom. So we can't even fully spoil it if we wanted to.
There's another page of special rules we haven't yet unlocked. There's a few more things in the envelope of secrets that we haven't had out yet.
Is a very tempting envelope of secrets.
Mm-hmm. Fateforge, Chronicles of Kaan. And that is the easiest bit of nomenclature in this game. Is a mythical action-adventure cooperative campaign full of surprising twists with a sprawling story and intense fights played in episodes of under an hour. The game offers an accessible, RPG-like board game experience for 1 to 4 players, meaningful narrative choices, and an action-packed combat scene at the heart of the game. You'll take on the role of a hero and backflip, double slash, and charge your way to victory. The app-driven story lets you navigate your way through a city full of intrigue, and your choices will ultimately determine the fate of an empire. Fateforge plays 1 to 4 players, designed by Gordon Killaire of Vengeance.
Another great game that we very much enjoy.
And has art from a number of artists, so Yusuf Artun, Mark Kasher, Max Kosick, Antonio Montine, and I think a couple of others.
It felt like there's a good few in there, and grand work all round, I'll say, before we get into the details.
It is published by Mighty Boards, and just a little thank you to Mighty Boards for providing our copy.
Yes, Matt ordered his version on the initial Kickstarter, and they were very kind to provide us with a second copy for us to play through up here in Board Stupid North, as we've been dubbed.
Exactly. And as mentioned, Fateforge plays in episodes of about an hour, which is actually a bit of a breath of fresh air with a lot of dungeon crawlers.
Yeah, you're not beholden to running through some mammoth story and you can't get to a point. You can pretty much, I suppose, outside of an exact combat, stop wherever you like.
Pretty much, yeah. And the app is very good at just saving exactly where you left off, and you can put it away very easily, pick it back up again. The game retails online for approximately £70.
Yeah, I've seen it around 70, 75.
And there's a lot in the box for that.
There is. We do have the deluxe edition. I'm not entirely certain. I think the retail edition might be ever so slightly stripped back from the one we're playing, but I don't think there's going to be a huge degree of change in there.
I did not double check and see what the differences are between the two, so a little caveat to this review, I suppose. This is the deluxe edition, so we might have some slightly fancier pieces. Fateforge has fantastic art design, so let's jump into the components and all the stuff that's in the box. So, to start with, Fateforge comes with a bunch of maps. Combination of like a big paper pull-out map that has the whole city of Esafir, and is sort of a strange Where's Wally style adventure map to move around the city and try and remember and locate exactly where you are in the city by picking out little points of interest that are like painstakingly detailed on the map.
Yeah, so it looks like your kind of traditional Middle Eastern set map. So the Where's Wally comparison comes from actually physically looking and searching for things within this printed map. Finding the tower with the flag with the 2 crossed swords, or the pub with the arrow sticking out of the top, and so on. You do actually have a proper search around.
We'll talk about it probably a little bit more when we talk about the game flow, but yes, the map quite literally requires you to find where you are sometimes and orient yourselves so that you know where to go next.
It's really nice, almost like a mini game, a good distraction from the either the intense combat or the main story. You do actually really get pulled into this city. You feel like it's a living, bustling thing you're making your way around. Yeah,
it's great. There are a couple of other maps that are sticker-based, so you peel off sections of the map as you uncover sections. There is a little set of stickers that will allow you to determine the names and some more details about various locations on the map.
It's like an unlock key system, so each main location is numbered on the map, and once you've found it and officially discovered it, you officially unsticker its name and description on the...
It tells you what it is rather than just that interesting big building that you've been walking past whilst wandering around aimlessly looking for something.
It's a neat little hint. It gives you some intrigue off the bat and a bit of... Again, it's all about that interaction as players.
To continue with the maps then, we also have a big stack of double-sided map tiles.
These map tiles are fantastic.
I love the map tiles.
Super detailed, super colourful. So, you might have in your head the idea of a dungeon crawler being dark greys and browns. They've almost gone out of their way to make these things pop. And I think this is one of the things that Max was brought in to help kind of reinvigorate at certain times, to really bring it to life, bring it to full colour and vibrancy.
Yes, there's a lot of outside and city-like environs to the map tiles, and they mix and match how they're put together for the various different scenarios. The map tiles themselves are all different shapes and sizes to sort of keep things interesting and create like a whole variety of different layouts, and they're not broken down into smaller hexes or squares like you might expect from, for example, like a D&D dungeon tile.
Yeah, not grid-based at all. It's very much...
They're just one zone.
You're in this tile or you're in the next tile. Very easy to keep track of your position in that regard. I think that's a great shout.
Which feeds into the mechanics that we'll talk about, but it's very clever, and it means that they can do a lot of different things with the map tiles.
And it means the artwork stands out that much more because it's not trying to do more with the mechanics than it needs to.
Yep. Beyond that, we have nice big double thick punch board player boards.
Yep, your individual player character boards are again beautifully coloured, beautifully detailed. You've got your main big character artwork. So you really get a feel of the character that you're playing for. So Tom picked the shaman. You've got this dancing goblin with his...
Goblin with drum. Or not with drum, perhaps.
Don't forget that drum, Tom. I chose the nobleman. So I've got these lovely sweeping robes and my scimitar ready to draw.
I think there's 5.
There are 5
characters in the main box.
Yeah, the forest guard, the rogue, and the mercenary are the other 3. Again, all super detailed.
Each of the characters also comes with a little tuck box that you can keep all of your various components in. So that covers cards for skills that you can unlock during the course of the game. It gives you somewhere to keep all of your little health and energy tokens and your lovely detailed miniature.
And all of the custom dice, of course.
And all of the fancy dice. So Fateforge comes with loads of different types of dice. The game will revolve around building dice pools. So we've got lots of custom dice that you can mix and match to power the engine of the game.
Yeah, not quite ISS Vanguard levels of volume of dice, but you do get the opportunity to mix and match in varying degrees when you unlock certain equipment or weapons and so on.
The engine is kept quite tight. It's always a small number of dice, but you can get a lot of flexibility in what you want to do with your dice.
Yeah, and those dice are really brightly coloured. Again, you've got good, clear colour coding on what they are. So the red ones are very fighty for melee. The blue ones are very much your ranged attack.
Yep.
Your yellow gives you more kind of utility and movement. And then you'll unlock certain specific weapon dice, which are, again, another colour altogether with some tonal hints for melee or ranged. And then there's like a subset of other dice. Oh, you have the green ones
We
for
have green
your
dice.
kind of more
Green
magical,
dice for focus,
focusy
which
type.
is skills and magic.
Mm. And then there's a few other subset ones for doing specific skill challenges, which will come up, which apparently, despite the fact only having one blank face, will roll blanks more often than not, we've found.
It's freakish how bad we are at doing skill checks, yes.
All part of the game, though.
Yeah. The box also comes with a set of double-sided thick wooden tokens with artwork on both sides that are used to represent all of the enemies.
These enemy pucks are a really good idea.
Really nice.
I've seen a few people online saying, oh, isn't there a way of getting enemy miniatures for all of these? You really don't need them. You really don't want them. There are 100 discs in here. That would be that'd be a whole nother box on its own.
With a comparison here to something like Gloomhaven, I actually kind of prefer the colourful pucks because they're much easier to assess on the board at a glance because they're colour-coded.
Gloomhaven was standees, is that right?
Yeah, cardboard standees. And they're less cluttered, and they're an easier and sort of easier to pack away solution. You can fit them all in one relatively small box.
Oh, it's a super neat little box. In fact, all of the components from your own specific player tuck boxes, the enemies have their own pack away, the dice have got this dual layered tucking away system that all then fits neatly back in the box. But yeah, the colourful, again, separated in kind of ranged and melee and specific type of enemy.
Yep. They're in categories, right?
So you get this really easy read board state mid-round or, before or after the fight. You go, okay, I can see that these people will be a problem when I get here because they're blue. They're going to do ranged attack. And the green guys will lock me down.
Yeah, and for those that are familiar with Vengeance, it's the same colour coding.
It is, yeah.
The green guys are the bruisers. The red guys are the random grunts, the regular grunts. The blue guys are always ranged. It's the same sort of system.
I think it's really clever. And as you say, there's the screen printing and they're double-sided. So some are the living and then the dead version of the kind of weird death cult type stuff. Or you've got animals, the cheetahs on one side, the dogs on the other. So you can mix and match as you need to. The game will always tell you exactly what you need.
It's very clever that they utilise both sides of the token to represent two different enemies so that they've got lots of variety without just recycling the same enemies over and over again. I think at one point we've remarked, oh, hang on, there's a massive chunk of cards for all the different enemies that we unlock during the course of the game. We still haven't seen loads of them.
Yeah, and those art cards are very cool as well. There's a good old deck box that controls a lot of the stuff. The enemies have their own cards, and there's varying types. You might have like Grunt 1, Grunt 2. Let's use that as a very basic example. They've got artwork. They've got coding of what they'll do and when and how they react. It's all really well tied together.
So we've got an unlock box, which is very much par for the course for these sort of campaign dungeon crawler style games. But in the box we have all of the different player skills. We have cards for fear, we have traps, we have corruption, we have story cards. We've got around 500 cards to represent equipment, treasure that we can unlock, all of the enemies we can unlock, and various other secret mechanics that pop up every now and then where you might get turned into a furry friend for a little while. And you can also use it to organise the enemies that you've already unlocked. So the first time you've seen an enemy, you then keep the card out and you can go back and look at them again. It gives a nice sort of sense of progression as you take cards out of one section, you sort of move them into an open section where you can then go back and look at them later.
You learn the game and you unlock the features so you can have them as reference in future. I think it's great. And across all of that, the quality is, I think, exceptional. Very detailed without being overly complicated.
And it's a lovely little cardboard. It's like one of those thick cardboard flip lid boxes with a magnetic
satisfying
clasp.
Magnetic closure.
Yes, exactly. Beyond that, we have loads of wooden tokens that represent things like health and armor and food. Time tokens. There's little plastic gems to represent money.
The crystals for the money is really satisfying when you chink one of those off.
There's lots of cardboard tokens to represent all the various different sort of interesting things that you can encounter on the map.
Condition markers, entrances, exits, things to unlock.
And again, most of those tokens are double-sided so that they are multi-purpose, which is another really clever thing to sort of keep down the number of components that you need.
Yeah, so each instance of a thing isn't necessarily a unique token, but the game will tell you this now represents this particular thing, and you don't even have to question it. You don't go looking and get confused.
This is objective A. Here you go. This is the token for objective A.
And I think that's absolutely fine.
Yeah.
So there's a big old stack of stuff in this box, Tom.
And it is worth mentioning, obviously, again, that this game is app-driven. You can't play it without the app, which is always a bit of a caveat, should that app then become unsupported in future or unavailable for whatever reason. But it's a very good app. It's quite clever in the way that it works behind the scenes. You can use it to track how well you do in encounters, and you can record your your condition at the end of a fight. And then if you're particularly struggling, it will take notice of that and tone things down a little bit, so you don't get relentlessly punished and pummeled over and over again.
Yeah, the app does not require an online connection. Once you've downloaded it, that's it. You just operate it in your tablet. I think you probably can run it in a web browser if you need to, but the idea is that you have it on a tablet, possibly on your phone, although I'd go for a larger screen if you've got one available.
I would definitely say put it on an iPad or a tablet, because it has a lot of text. It is not voice acted.
It is not,
which is not necessarily a bad thing, because, to be honest, if you wanted to play somewhere that wasn't particularly quiet, you can struggle to listen to voice acted apps. It means that you're a little bit more engaged. You can read through the narration as you go, but you don't want to be looking at tiny text.
I am slightly disappointed in your own narration, though, Tom. I have to say, you've
really?
not done any voices.
I haven't done any silly. To be honest, I'm not doing silly voices because I'm mostly wrestling with an extremely complex and unpronounceable set of names for the most part.
There's a lot of things with umlauts.
It's like, what the hell does that say?
to say that we're not too bad at reading things like that.
There are some characters I've just straight up given up on pronouncing the names.
A smaller side. I think the app works fine, really. It does the job well enough. It's got a bit of kind of ambient, I suppose you would say. It's not
ambient noise.
Not necessarily
background noise,
music, but
the sound of someone being stabbed repeatedly in the background.
If you're in the bustling market, you'll hear coins being jingled and maybe a market stall holder doing some vague calling out. And you do get these occasional "ooh, ah" in the middle of combat.
The combat scenes are quite funny.
It's quite hilarious. I think voice acting would have been interesting to have it read through, but all that being said, I know it's not for everyone. A lot of people don't actually enjoy that. Also, I know how expensive voice acting can be, and it would have really bumped up the production cost on this to a point I don't think you would gain as much as you would. I don't not want it to be another 50 quid or whatever. I don't think it's
necessary, really. Now, I do have one small gripe with the app, in that sometimes you can make a selection and then realise you can't go back, and there's no way of reviewing what you've just accidentally clicked on. The app is designed so that things that you can't go back to, you have to hold down the button for a couple of seconds, but I'm very trigger happy, and sometimes I immediately forget what I've clicked.
I literally had to smack your hand off the wrong option on Monday, which is quite funny.
Yep.
I do agree. There's been a few moments where would have wanted to be able to basically go to an overview page that at the exact point we were in the game we couldn't access. We were almost kind of locked into the current of thing that we were doing, that we couldn't get back to an overall view. Maybe like a glossary almost that we'd want of like, who was this, or something like that.
So some of those things are covered elsewhere. You have the story cards that I've mentioned, that as you hit major story beats, the game will prompt you to take story cards out of a deck, and then you can keep them in a little stack, and they chronologically sort of remind you of major story beats that have happened.
That's true, yes. You do have that available.
So there are things, but there's just every now and then you're like, I'd like to be able to go back and look at something, but I can't in the app. if you were to give this an overall production rating, Simon, what do you think of Fateforge?
Oh, it's 4 pushing a 5. I mean,
Fateforge, shiny Chronicles of Kaan with a nice sticker that says Deluxe Limited Edition on the inside of the box.
You know what? I'm gonna give this the 5. I'm gonna give it the 5.
I think it's got fantastic presentation. And we mentioned it, but I'm particularly impressed with how everything comes out of and goes back into the box so easily.
Oh, the pack away, consider everything we've just discussed, nearly about 20 minutes into this chat so far, all of those things, and we can pack this up at the end of the night in a
couple of minutes.
Well under 5 minutes. It's not even an issue because everything it has its home. You got your place for all of your character stuff. Quick tuck away. They stack in the box. All of the enemy stuff, it's just stacked away in its own little tray. All your dice, self-contained. The story unlock box, it's just constantly self-maintaining. You don't have to think about repacking all of this stuff.
Yeah, it's really, really good. And I think I agree. I think it's definitely up there as a 5. Particularly good value for money, I think. You can pay a similar amount for a lot less in a board game, and you can pay a lot more for a dungeon crawler that is inferior to this.
Yeah, this is well under the £100 mark, even at full retail. The amount you get and the amount of story I think we're going to be getting, no questioning, this is great value for money in terms of production.
Yeah. So I'm going to have to change my question slightly because it's not really going to be how do you win a game of Fateforge, because this is a co-op dungeon crawler. So ultimately we're working together and it's narrative driven. But how do we play a session of Fateforge?
Yeah, so this is kind of D&D for when you've got a group that no one wants to run the game for.
Yes.
You've got the app that does it for you. So here's the story as you start out. So kind of immediately
you have
drops
some
you
choose
in.
your own adventure. It's not as open as D&D, but if no one's running your game for you, you can't really be too choosy.
Yeah. So we tend to stop at a natural rest point.
Yep.
So we then pick up the story from that last thing. So we get a short recap of here's what's happened so far, here's what we are currently aiming to do, and you've got some options from there. So it might be that we need to leave the rest place and we go and explore. We try and find the next bit of thread. Or we've got 1 or 2 or maybe 3 different options. We go, okay, we're going to head down this way.
So the game is sort of it's broken up into major acts. The campaign has 3 major acts. And then within the acts, you will get a sort of a series of sort of smaller arcs, if you like, where you'll have a number of encounters of some description, normally combat, followed by an opportunity to rest, recuperate, spend money, do little side quests, train skills, visit points of interest, those sorts of things before you go back to the puzzly combat mechanics of the game.
It's very much a classic RPG kind of game, isn't it, really? I'm thinking back to... And as much as I don't want to compare this to video games, because as much as it's app-dependent, it really does feel like a true board game to me. But it's putting me in mind of things like early days Oblivion. You're like, okay, I've potentially got everywhere to go, but really I want to... It's kind of like the funneled version of that. You've got a limited number of things you want to be able to achieve.
Yeah. Well... We mentioned it before. There are various points during a rest scene or after a rest scene where you're presented with the city map, and you're like, okay, well, we need to find this thing that the story has told us we need to go and look for. But actually, the app just lets us sort of navigate freely around the city to try and find what we're looking for. It might take us a while if we wander around aimlessly, or we can study the map and try and work out exactly where it is. There'll be a number of different sort of hints and clues to try and point us in the right direction. But it feels open, right? It feels like a proper sort of open adventure where you do get to sort of pick what you're doing.
Yeah, almost, again, going back to video games very briefly, almost back to the old 80s style text adventure-driven ones. I remember having almost like
Choose your own adventure.
An Amstrad or something like,
you're standing in a sure. Go north.
Go north, quite literally.
Yes.
What do you mean you can't find the light switch? I know, wrong game. Good old Robbo. Yeah, so you get to these points of interest. So you choose your map direction if you're in the kind of free flow state that it gives you, and it says you find yourself in front of a statue of unpronounceable clearly this is the university district and there's a number of interesting buildings around, and you go, okay, maybe I want to investigate this particular thing. Or you go, oh no, actually we heard that he was down in the docks, so we'll make our way down to the docks, and you can either go through the main market store or you can go along the cliff edge.
And this is very different from like my experience with Gloomhaven, for example, where you have a city map. All of the points of interest on the city map are numbered, essentially. And over the course of the game, you will unlock those locations and do stuff there. But you don't get to really explore the city. It's just a list of locations. You actually get to explore the city to varying degrees of success in this.
And I really like that. I'm not sure there's any random encounters. I think that would have been kind of fun. But I do quite like the tightness of it being, it is a multi-branched thing. There are lots of choices in here. So it's not you'll do start to finish and you'll always see the same thing. You can choose where you go and maybe trigger other stuff as you go along.
We're trying to avoid spoilers here, but we have discussed with Matt and Wayne, for example, and even just in the first sort of opening beats of the campaign, they went in a completely different direction, and we had to deal with, frankly, psychotic individual who we chased around the city for a while because we were supposed to be helping them.
Yeah, I don't think there's any spoiler to say you arrive at the city looking for someone important to where you have come from in your hometown or home environment. You meet someone that purports to be related or knowing where they are. And immediately that's your first choice. Choose to believe them or not, or go along with their suggestions.
Help them or don't help them. Okay. Take your pick. And then it branches from there.
Absolute chaos ensues immediately. But then again, depending on how well you succeed in the chaos that comes quickly after, will then give you the next outcome. It won't be, this happened and regardless the next thing happens. It's, okay, well, you did or didn't achieve the particular objective, so here are now the next two options.
And there are cleverly inserted little skill checks or trait checks, that you need to do in order to potentially sort of succeed or fail on certain story choices. And again, they branch if you succeed or you fail, or in our case, fail regularly.
Yeah, I think some of them are degrees of success. Yeah. So you might get a better reward, a lesser reward, or no reward. And I think others are key information points that you'll either come across in a different method if you fail, or it kind of maybe just shuts that idea down for a bit and it might well circle back to it.
Yeah.
As I say, we're still exploring this game, so I think
I'm always super curious to see the sort of story map, the decision point tree.
I really want to see the web
of these
this.
Sorts of games and see how things link back together, between various sort of decision nodes. Unfortunately, we can't see that at the moment, but I'm sure if we asked really nicely, we might be able to get some insight into it. And perhaps, actually, Matt and Wayne might have asked about that when they were doing their interview this week.
Maybe they did. Yeah, we've not met Mr. Kaleo yet, but it'd be an interesting discussion, wouldn't it?
Yeah. So when you get into the meat of the game, this is a dungeon crawler, not necessarily in a dungeon, but the action is very fast, it's programmed, and it's flashy. Very much like Vengeance.
Yeah, you should feel like a badass unless you roll real bad.
Exactly. So you will build a dice pool, depending on the dice that you have available to you, which is set by your character and the sort of equipment that you've got over the course of the game. You'll select 4 dice. You roll those dice, and then you have to decide in which order you would like to use the faces that have come up on your dice, whether you're moving or using special skills or shooting at someone who's far away or attacking someone who's in your space. There's not a massive number of symbols on the dice, but the ways in which you can apply them and the order in which you can apply them is the guts of the game, and that is the puzzle in the game, because you are very, very restricted on time for each adventure.
You are.
3, 4, maybe 5 rounds, and you will have to try and weave your way through this scene that sometimes has dozens of enemies and looks completely insurmountable when you start. You have to try and work out the most efficient way with your team to get through the scene, minimizing the damage that you've taken and most efficiently dealing with the enemies that are in your way.
is a kind of a big efficiency puzzle, really, isn't it?
It is.
Which I think we both really enjoy.
Yeah. There's no dice rolling once the action starts. It's roll the dice at the start of the round, do all of your discussion and planning and puzzling, and then play out the planned, programmed puzzle and try and make sure that you do it in the most efficient way possible, with some surprises, because the app will throw at you enemy activations at some point in the middle of the round.
Yeah. I think Tom and I are probably, I wouldn't say giving ourselves the easy route, but...
I'm not playing the easy route. I forgot to give myself my key equipment for most of the campaign.
Yeah, so maybe the fact... The idea with this is you get a little dice shield as well, and you're supposed to roll in secret, despite the fact this is co-op.
Yes.
Roll in secret and give ideas and hints as to how and what you can achieve in your turn without explicitly saying, I can kill enemy 3, 4, and 7. I think that's almost punishingly hard, depending on the situation.
This comes up in various dungeon crawlers, and it's an effort with co-op games to discourage quarterbacking. Someone who runs the whole game and tells people what to do.
Yeah.
But we're not really those sorts of players.
I don't think so. Certainly not as a partnership, because you can probably math it better than I can. Yeah. I'll ignore whatever you say anyway. So
quite possibly. Yeah.
I like being able to have a decent think about it. I'm also doing my best, though. This is an action RPG in my eyes. Doing my best to not overthink it. There's only so far you can go with getting the perfect plan and going, all right, this is the best I can do with a minute of thinking. If I spend more on this, I'm going to change it by maybe 1 health point. It doesn't matter.
Where you're trying to emulate fast-paced, kicking in the door, taking out all the guys in the room and then rushing into the next room, very sort of like John Wick style.
Yeah.
It's easy to roll dice at the beginning of the round and then stop, and all the action stops while you spend 10 minutes going, oh my god, what order do I do these things in? How do I avoid this enemy? And oh damn, this enemy's going to do this thing that stops me from moving, so I can't do the stuff in the order that I want to do it in. Now I've got to rethink everything. I
think that's, again, coming back to those bold colours of the enemies on those pucks. If it was miniatures, you'd have a slower think, because you'd have to work out what they were.
Yep.
Being able to quickly read that board state and go, okay, I can move up to 3 spaces. Oh, but if I move into the second one, I'm going to get stuck because there's a green guy in there. He's going to lock me down.
Yep.
So let me just quickly rethink on that. And go, all right, sod it. I'm legging in. I'm throwing everything I've got at this one guy. And then, Tom, you're going to follow me. I'm not giving you a choice now. You're following me. I'm going first.
I'll run after you, banging a drum. It's all good.
And the app will tell you which order everyone activates in. You can choose player order within that initiative, but it will tell you enemies go first, enemies go between you as a reaction.
Yeah.
Or sometimes they just have their turn at the end. I think they always activate at the end.
So with 2 players, the enemies either go before we do, or they go in between our turns, and they get a reaction. And when the reaction happens, up to 2 enemies on the board will do something.
And that's specifically not 2 types of?
Up to 2 enemies total.
Yeah.
And there'll be 1 of each of 2 different colours of enemies. So you can't really predict what's going to happen unless you know that you've eliminated certain enemies from the board. They're not in the running anymore. And then at the very end of the round, all of the enemies will activate, and in some cases that means they activate again.
Yeah.
But when they activate, you can see exactly what they're going to do on the card, because they have pre-programmed behaviours, and sort of like Gloomhaven with the enemies, you can predict what they're going to do, but unlike Gloomhaven, there is no randomness to what the enemies are going to do.
See, I've never played Gloomhaven, so the comparisons will only go so far in my eyes. But I'm sure most of our listeners will have a good idea.
Yeah.
In that comparison.
Honestly, I really like this because I like games where I can predict and see the engine and sort of understand how it's going to work, how it's going to behave, and then we can work that efficiency puzzle. That's very satisfying.
Yes, I have to agree. I don't want to have the randomness of my dice and then the randomness of the enemies on top in what you found a very tight game in terms of efficiency for your own actions. If you get those 4 rounds, that's 4 activations each to maybe move 8, 9, 10 spaces, kill everyone in the way, because otherwise they will kill you. Unlock chest A, get to exit B, don't lose object C on the way. Like, there's a lot to do in a very short amount of time. So not having to worry about, I wonder what that guy might do. It's like, no, If we get to this position, he'll definitely come to us. If we get to position 1 away, he'll try and shoot us.
And you won't get halfway through the round and then say, oh, no, well, now I need to roll my dice to work out if I hit this guy, or I need to draw a card to work out if the damage modifier that I'm going to get is going to be sufficient. You don't have that. You've programmed everything. You get to see things play out as you have planned. Yeah,
this is almost like a tiny clairvoyance, isn't it?
Yes.
It hasn't got the real-time dice rolling that Vengeance Roll and Fight or, for example, Project Elite have got. Anyone that's familiar with Project Elite, where you suddenly get...
it's much closer to Vengeance.
Yeah, you get that bunch of enemies suddenly spawn at the beginning, or we found even per round, interestingly, depending on the setup of the board. You know what's coming for you, and rather than having to deal with it moving at real-time pace, you go, okay, they're there, I'm here. Next 5-6 seconds of action, going back to a D&D kind of thing. I'm going to
play out all of this action. I'm going to achieve exactly what I said I was going to do.
Achieve 2 hits. I'll be able to block 1, and I'll be able to move an extra space.
You get to be the badass, which is what you said before. Yeah. Right. Okay. So on BGG, this gets about a 2.7 complexity, which I think is probably fair. It's definitely not super heavy. There's certainly some crunchiness in the puzzle, in the efficiency puzzle.
Yeah.
But I don't think the game is so punishing that if you make a misplay, you cannot recover.
It's all very fall forward. If you fault on...
Absolutely. It fails forward almost at every single turn. The game is quite clear about the fact that even if you fail most missions, it will not make you sit and replay the mission. The story will adapt, and it will probably keep going.
Apparently, some of the boss fights, which we've yet to encounter, are a win or repeat.
Yes. Okay.
I'm fine with that. I'd actually quite like the chance to redo some of the fights we've
failed
had.
The first boss fight.
We did.
Yeah.
And the story continues, and we just have a different side of the outcome, which I think is great. I don't mind having the opportunity to redo a fight, because some of these skills and abilities and weapons are awesome. They're so flavorful. Yeah. They're so evocative of flourishing combat. And you go, oh, it's almost over too quickly in a way.
Yes.
But you don't want it to sit there being a slog either. So
no.
It's managed to find a real good balance.
I think. You can build some really interesting sort of combinations between your skills. Actually, we haven't really talked about the skills.
I was just going to say, we need to discuss some of what we really get into.
So when you roll your dice and you have the faces on your dice, you're not stuck with those dice faces necessarily. You will have a set of skills, and you earn more and change them over the course of the game. You will eventually have sort of choice to upgrade certain skills, but you will have a bunch of different skills that allow you to manipulate the dice. Most of them are once per round, but you can, for example, take a miss on a dice. For me, I can take a miss on a dice, I can turn it into a focus symbol, and then I can take that focus symbol and turn it into a ranged attack or a melee attack with one of my other skills. So you can do all sort of clever dice manipulation to get a more favourable set of dice faces that you can then play out in the round.
Yeah, in fact, there's some dice faces, if we call it that aren't even technically on the dice. The block one stands out to me.
Yeah.
I've got things that will say, if you do this, you get a block. And I'm like, well, I can't roll a block, so I need to kind of have that skill unlocked, which I think is very cool. The nobleman has an interesting twist as well, because he can choose a stance.
Stance mechanics, right? You choose one of 2 stances to be in every round.
And each of those will give me a different option per round, and I can switch each time we prep, which is between rolls of the dice, basically. I can say, okay, well, my low guard as the fencer isn't working anymore. I'm going to go to arrow stance, which generally means I'll
super fast and
move
mobile.
Quicker. I can ignore some damage. It feels like a really effective on-the-fly change of combat tactics. You can get we've kind of been calling them a critical melee attack or a critical ranged attack, which is kind of your sword or your arrow with a spark or a flame around it.
Yes.
Immediately, it's just still a melee hit or a ranged hit.
It doesn't do anything unless you have a symbol that means it does something different.
I quickly unlocked the one that says, okay, if you roll this, it's still an attack. You still get your hit, but also you get to block as well. So I'm like, okay, cool. Where before I've been quite fearful of staying in melee. Now I'm like,
now
excellent.
You can be aggressive and defensive at the same time.
I'll go spinning in and smashing about. I've now got one that combos with that gives me the block and an extra attack. So I'm doubly dangerous as well as still maintaining that defensive stance. I think it's great. Or alternatively, I can switch out that stance, and I'm suddenly pinging around doing smaller hits, but maybe hitting 3 different enemies in a turn.
Moving loads.
or making them pay if they dare to attack me on their reaction.
Yeah, retribution.
I remember taking out a good number of dogs that we were getting attacked by simply because I had a block and they attacked me, and well, sorry, that means you die on this round. Very, very satisfying, very cool. Thematic. And every character feels really different, I think. I was looking through the other characters that we've not played as. They've got some fantastic looking stuff.
All the characters feel really, really different.
I'm almost envious of the one I'm not playing whilst really enjoying the one I'm playing.
Brilliant. So, well, I think we've probably already answered the question, but theme gameplay interactions. Does this game feel thematic to you?
Yeah, I've really engaged with this one. I think you have too. The story feels fairly compelling. It's arguably nothing wild in terms of story. It's stuff that you've maybe seen before or styles thereon.
It's not standard fare Tolkien fantasy.
No, I think it's got quite a Middle Eastern flair to it. What I will say, and
it's intriguey.
I want this to be a fully positive response. I find it very evocative of what it's trying to do. I think it's very engaging. We have been playing on a Monday night. We both have office the next morning, so we've been having to cut things not short, but not progress. And I'm quite often left wanting to keep going on to the next stage. Which I think is very telling of how intriguing it is, that you really want to find out more. When we
had a little story twist this week, and we're like, I knew that person was a bad guy. Yes.
It gets the bit. I mean, if you don't already know, listeners, we are both massive RPG fans. In general, we've been playing D&D a whole bunch recently. Kind of ties into that bit of my brain in terms of wanting to tell the story without having all of the background work of specifically design your character, have an ongoing the need to come up with ideas yourself. It's kind of given to you on a plate, so you can enjoy the real crunch of the action.
And I think right into the other vein, the crunchy, puzzly action really appeals to me as well, because it's programmed. There's not a huge amount of randomness to it. You get to sort of plan out what you're going to do. You have to deal with a bit of sort of uncertainty with the ways in which the enemies might activate, but it means you get to feel like a badass. Very much so when you play things out in the right order and you sort of take out a whole room of bad guys all in one go.
We've seen both sides of it, hasn't it? We've absolutely had our asses handed to us, and we've completely wiped an entire scene
with time to spare.
A round in hand. You're like, oh wow, that was amazing.
I'm just gonna stand here and heal us since I've got a round to waste. Yeah.
You don't get huge numbers of hit points, so we're sat here with 6 HP, 6 hits on us.
Yep.
Keep in mind some of the enemies can do a +1 or +2 hit, so you get hit bad, you get hit real bad. So you're feeling it's all very impactful. You get a small amount of energy tokens to spend as well, which are very interesting. They allow you to re-roll certain dice or to push forward for movement. Again, I've just on this last game we played found a way to almost double up on that, and my energy movement also allowed me to attack, which was amazingly powerful. Really allowed me to dart around the battlefield and still keep that melee momentum up.
It just plays more into this sort of feel of the game, of the super fast-paced, flashy action where you guys feel like heroes.
Yeah, you've got potions you can buy or you get rewarded with, which I can imagine chugging mid-action suddenly replenishes all this energy and right, I'm off again. And you just go charging around. So yeah.
Super duper satisfying.
Super thematic, really works. Some people I think maybe won't gel quite so well with the progress of it, setting the map out and so on. I think it works perfectly well. I think for map management, so we mentioned these tiles at the beginning. The app will set out the scene. It will say you need tiles A13, 14, 21, 22, B6 and 7.
But it lists all your components for you, and it's like, get these components out. Okay, here's the layout.
I would very much recommend, if you wouldn't consider this normally, keep all of the same size type together. So all of your big squares stacked in numerical order, all your small squares stacked in numerical order. It makes finding everything so much easier. I remember playing Mansions of Madness is the game that I've played that's similar to this in terms of a map layout on an app.
Yep.
And the person I was playing with seemed to take forever to set each scenario up, and it drove me mad. If you keep everything stacked in order and by size, you can whack it out in 30, 45 seconds. You can then put it back. Please put it back in order as well while you're playing. It really, really helps. And then,
incidentally, Simon's in charge of the tiles.
It makes it so much easier, and it means that you don't lose that engagement between, we had a really cool bit of story, and then it got to this crunch point, and now we're going into combat. Hold with me, listener, while I spend 5 minutes. It's like, no, battle map ready, 30 seconds, you're done, you jumped into it.
Okay, well, you've segued nicely there into sort of the game flow. Turn length, game flow. I love the episodic sort of 1 hour at a time. Relatively easy to sort of get everything out, like you said. Super easy to pack everything away. You can just drop the game after one combat. You don't have to keep going until you hit a rest point. You don't even need to really save anything. You just put all of your stuff back in your tuck box for your hero.
Yep.
The app remembers the game condition for you.
Yep.
And then you just pick it up again next time.
Yeah, knowing that you're not necessarily having to dive into an unknown 3+ hour dirge. Yeah. Very, very good.
Clarity of rules, in the same vein. It's not a massive rulebook by any stretch of the imagination. And I think I only really made sort of one mistake, and that was just one of the setup things.
Yeah, and we're blaming Wayne for that one, I believe.
Yeah, and I'm blaming Wayne for that one.
Yeah, you've read more of the rulebook than I have. The bits I've seen, totally clear. They've got an icon glossary on the back page, always great for reference. You've got a pretty handy player
to be honest,
as well.
We're getting 95% of the game off a little sort of A6-sized, double-sided reference card.
And I'll say, even then, I have barely looked at that.
We don't really need to reference it very much, no.
Most of I suppose all of the story is on the app.
Yep.
It's a fair amount of reading, but it's not an undue amount of reading. It's enough to really get you into the setting, the theme.
Enough for immersion.
It tells you who and what's going on. Great description, really flavourful.
Unpronounceable names.
Everything else is little token cards and your dice, and it's all just there. Roll this, combine them together, it becomes this thing. Well, what's this thing? Well, it's an attack with a +1. It's real straightforward.
I sort of feel like a lot of these dungeon crawler games can become death by tokens or death by components.
Yeah.
And because a lot of things are sort of multi-purpose, you don't really have that here. It's actually relatively restrained in terms of the number of components.
There's a lovely familiarity by having that shared component thing. And again, I think some people will strive for having uniqueness in everything, and I don't think it benefits from it. I think the tightness of this, all of your enemy types are similar, but the cards that drive them might vary. And I think doing it by
lots of variety in the cards,
doing it by alternating cards rather than another unique miniature with another unique entry in a book of
that you
rules.
Only ever use once.
It's that real trimmed down approach, and I think it really helps that whole gameplay approach.
Okay, so obvious question: does the game respect your time?
I absolutely think so. Yeah,
I think it's fantastic for its episodic nature.
Build it around 30 hours of content or there and thereabouts. I think we've done 4 full sessions.
We are at around 13, 14 hours, something like that.
Yeah, probably. Yeah, I was going to say 10
to
12 hours maybe. So we're probably approaching the halfway mark, eager for more. We're lucky enough to have the first expansion as well, the Clash of the Immortals, which has more map tiles in it, a whole different setting, whole bunch of more adventures to get involved in.
Mounted combat rules.
Yeah, there's extra rules. There's henchmen to hire.
Another character.
And there's the lovely druidess as modelled by
the
lovely Evelyn.
The Enchantress.
Yes, the Enchantress, sorry, yes. So yeah, another exciting set of options in there. So yeah, there's a lot of gameplay, I think, in here. And I would genuinely, really, really want to replay this with different set of characters, because we're playing 2 of the 5.
Yeah.
Some people are playing solo with 2 characters, which I think is an interesting approach.
Yeah, I could definitely see just playing one character being quite restrictive.
And then, of course, as we say, there's a lot of branching choices. Do you want to side with this guy, or do you want to lie to this guy? Do you want to ignore them entirely? We've done all of one type so far. I guess playing the relatively standard good guy approach with some hints of hesitation about people's motivations. I'd love to just go, sod it, let's see what happens, and go for the weird option every time.
I definitely played a bit of chaotic goblin for a while, but yeah. So, Simon, you just mentioned we have the first expansion. What do you mean?
Well, it first comes before second, Tom, and there is a new expansion coming. It is day of recording. We're on the 12th. It launched yesterday. It's already successful. This is Kin of the Wild. So this one introduces, I guess you call them pets, but pets probably a bit underwhelming when you consider that these have their own action board, action dice, skills and effects and
They're
abilities.
Like full-blown companions.
It looks really cool. There is a mountain goat, there is a lynx, there's some kind of glowing birdie thing that I couldn't quite work out what it was. There's some really cool looking stuff in here. A whole new story which involves these new pets, so they won't necessarily be backwards compatible with the existing game. Obviously, harder to add into an existing story things that haven't existed yet.
Although worth highlighting that you can take the Enchantress and play that in the core campaign.
Absolutely, yes, you can. And I suppose
so there may well be some compatibility.
They'll probably taking some stuff forward rather than the newest stuff back in. I don't think that's a problem though. No. The idea is that this is a new story with new abilities, and these are add-on characters to your main set of heroes. So you take some of your existing heroes, take them into this new adventure with some animal sidekicks, and it sounds fantastic.
Okay. Final thoughts. What do you most like about Fateforge?
Working out those perfect combos of dice.
So satisfying.
There's been nary a game that's been as satisfying with a roll of 4 dice as this game has. Because, you're saying build the dice pool. So far, I've added 1 from my starter 4.
You don't get a lot of dice. Yeah. No. It's just a little bit of choice. Switch 1 dice out, switch 2 dice out.
But having the right set of skills, magic items, weapons, and other potions that will say, okay, maybe you rolled a miss, but actually your miss can now turn into a block for you. And then, this boot that you don't really want to move anywhere with, actually you can use that to trigger your offhand dagger.
Yep.
And then you can use these other 2 to do some crazy double hit and a jump backwards.
I've very rarely found that I couldn't do something or have at least a couple of different game plans for every given round. Yeah. Even though I'm only essentially rolling 4 dice, I always felt like I had plenty of options to sort of play into. I might end up wasting a dice here or there, but it's very uncommon that I can't do anything with at least 3 of my dice.
Your build slightly more than mine has a really good flow where it goes, if I've got this, I can make it this. Then I can make that same thing this. Yeah. And then I can turn this thing into like a multi-stage cascade of effects, which is fantastic.
Sort of build little sort of clever circuits with your skills and get them all to sort of link together so that you can get whatever symbol you need, you can make with pretty much anything else.
Mine have been a bit more standalone, but generally I've been able to trigger most, if not all, of everything, or just continue with the basic attacks. The basic attacks are fantastic.
And
anyway.
here there's just an example with just 2 characters. You're playing a very different character. You've got this sort of flow instead that revolves around doing move and attack sequences or attack and move sequences.
Yes.
That you have to play out in that specific order. You get more action efficiency out of it, but you're restricted because you have to do things in a certain order. I don't, but I get less actions.
Yeah, so I suppose you're less directly combative in that sense, but you've got a bit more freedom in what you do. As you say, I'm very foot forward, knife in hand, sword in hand. Yeah. I'm very, I could probably have built it a different way. I could maybe lean more into the other directions, and that's one of the best things about it is that interchangeability. And I don't feel like I'm ever locked into, I move forward and I hit, and then I move forward and I hit. I'm like, no, dude, I dive roll and I shank this guy, and then once he's gone, I can flick sideways into this thing and take that out, and then I can throw a dagger and I can unlock this thing, and then you can come charging in behind me.
It's so evocative. It's great. I love the sort of like door kicking action. Is there anything you don't like about the game? Name a thing.
We mentioned the slight niggles with the app.
I think there's a couple of app niggles.
Not a major setback. We've not suffered from that at all. It was just it would have been nice to see that right now, but we can see that when we can see it. And as much as anything, I think that's my failing memory to just keep in mind all of the things.
And I think, there's a lot of games where I sort of feel like the app is not necessary. I think it's a good vessel for delivering all the narrative that's in the game.
Yeah, the alternative would be we'd be reading through a storybook, find paragraph 97. Like, all right. Or you can just show me on the screen. I don't mind that.
Yeah, you can do. Now, I've played a few games that are like this where, although they're app-driven, they come with a pick-your-own-adventure book that has all of the narrative written into it as well. Should, God forbid, the app become unsupported at some point, you can still play it. You don't have that with Chronicles. I would have maybe liked to see that, but again, trying to stuff all of the narrative into a book, that's quite a lot of narrative. I could see that being, something that a lot of people wouldn't necessarily ever use, and it's extra production costs. So I can see why they would have
it is a lot of extra production. It's more weight in the box. Localizing it is, I think, with that much harder.
Yeah.
You can, not to say just use Google Translate, but if you've got, it was written in English. If you want to translate that a bit more readily into another language, I think having it digitized by default is going to be easier than resetting it all, reprinting it all, finding a local printer perhaps even to do it per country.
Yeah.
I think it just makes it all that more accessible. It's one of the few games that I've played with an app, and I am absolutely happy with it to be on there. As much as I play board games specifically to get away from a screen, this is really not intrusive in any way. It's
mostly, here you go, here's a something that helps you track and clean up the combat and set up the map.
Yeah, even things like the reactions of the enemies. If that was, I don't even know how you would handle that manually. You'd have to
you could have a set of cards that
roll a dice
it.
Or draw a card.
Yeah.
And then, it'd have to be a separate set of cards that are the reaction cards, because they don't necessarily do the same as the main enemy action. It would just get complicated.
I do appreciate them taking away some of the admin and putting it into the app and being quite clever about how they've balanced using the app.
Yeah, absolutely. As I say, it's kind of D&D when no one wants to run the game. Yeah. It takes over, and I think it does 99.5% of the time a fantastic job.
Yeah, definitely. So who would this game be for or not for? Where do you think this game is aimed?
Just said it. Those who like D&D light, things that you're welcome a bit of story without it being overly story driven.
Yeah,
I think it's definitely story driven, but it's not overwhelming.
I think your tactical D&D player who likes the sort of the puzzle of trying to work out the best way through a combat would really appreciate this.
There's as much as there are other skill checks and there is a lot of narrative decision making. There's no denying it's a combat-driven game. So, absolutely. Those who like that bit more tactical, combat-oriented dice chucker, absolutely for them.
Brilliant.
I think people may not quite like the efficiency puzzle kind of thing like we do. So those maybe who are overly prone to...
Yeah, you could come into this being sort of quite into the the Ameritrashy sort of games and wanting to have a load of dice chucking and sort of... the opportunity to sort of like throw a dice and get a big crit, and suddenly you've knocked a guy out that you hadn't planned to take out, and it's like it's a fist pump moment. They don't really happen because you plan out the whole round and then you play out the round.
Yeah,
there's still some surprises, but
there are.
It means that you're more consistently badass than surprising every now and then.
It needs a degree of consideration without trying to over-optimize, because I think ever so slightly we're both wanting to get the absolute best result every turn, and honestly, you can't. There is no perfect run-through of this game. You cannot get everything done every single... It's not designed to have that facility where you pick up every gem,
decide
you open every
when you
chest.
want to push your luck and which routes you want to take. And quite often the map has sort of multiple ways that you can go.
I was just going to say, you very much in some of the maps, are we going left or right? Because once we've committed, we're not coming back to this whole side. It can't happen. Unless the game, jumps in and says, well, actually, while you're doing that,
those guys start chasing
these guys might do this, or I was going to almost gave away one of the spoilers, but the map might change mid-combat, which is very intriguing.
Yes, don't take the map for granted. A final word then, Simon, and your perhaps your overall rating.
A deluxe edition with a deluxe rating. I'm going to... I wish we had half points, but I realise that
half point. Do what you want. You do what you want.
9 out of 10. It's sitting well between a 4 and a 5 for me.
Yeah.
I was very nearly backed this on the Kickstarter, and I literally missed it by the day. I kind of woke up and went, right, I'm just going to spend the money. I was like, oh damn, it finished yesterday. Never mind.
I mean, you guys got a chance to play this at Spiel, the year before last?
Spiel 23 we demoed
when
this.
It was being kickstarted at that time, I think.
Yeah. Being in a foreign country at the time the Kickstarter was going, I was like, I'll probably unpack it while I'm away. And then I got home and had the post-Spiel recovery. I'm like,
forgot.
I'll get to it. But that demo totally sold it to me from the start. We had played Vengeance Roll and Write at that point. So I was like, oh, I understand this system. You get these dice and they do this thing. Yeah. That's amazing.
Yeah.
And then this cool, like, tile-placed map and real story-driven adventure. Like, this is a fantastic combo.
I like the engine. I love how the dice mechanics work, and it's sort of like quite clever, not super complicated, but you feel like you get to make a lot of choices, and it's this sort of clever little puzzle where you can try and maximize your effectiveness as you clear rooms out of bad guys.
Or even in the rest scenes. I'm not sure we particularly mentioned, in the rest scenes you get a bunch of time tokens to spend. This is your downtime, quite literally. And you get a bunch of choices. So you might be able to go to a market and get some upgraded
Can't do everything.
Weapons or armor, or you buy some magic potions, or you go on a little side quest. But each of them takes a set amount of time, and you can't do everything. So even at that juncture, even in the rest period, you're like...
always making choices.
Oh, yeah, what do you want to do? Do you want to do some training so we get even more badass in the combats, or do you want to...
I'm going to spend all of my time in the bathhouse until it's time to start fighting guys again.
Yeah, sometimes you might just need a big old rest and go, oh, heal me, I'm dying.
Yeah, I think I agree with you. This is definitely up there, somewhere between a 4 and a 5 out of 5. I think this has got brilliant DNA for a dungeon crawler, and it's a long way stripped back from some very, very heavy legacy and campaign dungeon crawlers, which, I own some of them, and to be honest, it's quite hard to sort of stick with them because you know that they're hundreds of hours of commitment. You know that they have loads of miniatures. You're only going to use each of those miniatures once. You know that you are not necessarily going to be able to keep the group together.
Yeah, I really appreciate that it's not overwhelming. I've not got that Gloomhaven experience, as I said. This is super accessible, and really, I love the contained nature of it. You know that it has a finite end in a very good way. You are telling a story one way or another, and you're getting to a point, and then there's more to come if you want it.
There's a definitive ending. You can even sort of almost see where you are on a progress bar and get an idea of how far you are through the story. And you know that you can play it in hour-long chunks, which is great.
Designed to be episodic is fantastic.
Yeah, and I think it's something that should be done more with this sort of game, really. But you have to design the right sort of game for it, because there's a lot of setup and teardown for these games, and sometimes, it's only worth it for some people if they've spent 3 hours playing it because it took them 45 minutes to set it up in the first place.
Yeah.
Anyway. So, thanks for listening to Board Stupid. If you like what we do, please remember to subscribe to us for updates and to get future episodes of the show from all good podcast services. You can also find us on Facebook or Instagram, as well as on YouTube, where you'll find game reviews, unboxings, and loads of other discussions from Matt and Wayne. Just search for @BoardStupidUK, that's BOARD, and we're bound to pop up. If you like our content, do us a favour, give us a 5-star review wherever you can review us, and share the links to the episodes on social media. Tell a friend, tell all of your friends, shout it at people in the street.
Summon a pet, tell them to.
If you've got any feedback or questions, stick it in the comments or get in touch on our socials. We love to hear from people. Have you played Fateforge? Do you enjoy the fast-paced, door-kicking action and super slick puzzle? Did you forget to unpack the Shaman's Drum until halfway through the campaign and accidentally play on hard mode? Who would have done that? Thanks for listening. We'll catch you again real soon.
Go check out that Kickstarter and join us on the adventure.